The bright lights of New Seoul Station sparkled like stars against the evening sky. Commander Dae-ho Kim, known to most people as Big Shaq, stepped out of his personal spaceship and looked at the busy spaceport around him. He was very tall, 7 feet and 2 inches, with broad shoulders and strong muscles. His size came from growing up on planet Titan, where the gravity was much stronger than Earth's. Dae-ho watched as people hurried past him. Some gave him strange looks, while others quickly moved out of his way. He was used to this reaction. His huge size often made people nervous, even though he was actually very gentle and kind. "Commander Kim, your bags have been moved to your hotel," said his assistant through the small device in his ear. "Would you like me to arrange transportation?" "No, thank you," Dae-ho replied softly. His voice was deep but gentle. "I think I'll walk. It's a beautiful evening." He had just finished an important meeting with the Galactic Alliance, where he had helped make peace between 2 fighting alien groups. Now, all he wanted was a good meal at a nice restaurant. He smiled to himself, thinking about Starlight Gardens, the famous Earth Korean fusion restaurant he had bought 3 months ago. Nobody knew he was the owner. He had bought it through a company with a different name. As Dae-ho walked down the clean, bright streets of New Seoul, he saw many changes since his last visit 5 years ago. The buildings were even taller now, with gardens growing on their sides. Flying cars moved between the buildings in neat lines. The smell of street food mixed with the clean air from the city's air purifiers. He stopped to help a small robot that had fallen over while delivering packages. The robot beeped happily at him, and a nearby child smiled at his kindness. Moments like these made Dae-ho happy. They reminded him why he worked so hard to protect human colonies across space. When he was younger, living on Titan had been hard. The heavy gravity made his body grow big and strong, but it also made other people treat him differently. They thought someone so big must be stupid or dangerous. But Dae-ho had worked hard to prove them wrong. He studied, trained, and eventually became one of the most respected commanders in the Galactic Alliance. As he walked, he remembered why he had bought Starlight Gardens. He had visited the restaurant last year and loved the food, but he noticed how some of the staff treated customers who looked different. He saw them being rude to aliens and people from high-gravity worlds like himself. Instead of getting angry, he decided to buy the restaurant and make it a place where everyone would be treated with respect. The restaurant was just ahead now. Its elegant sign glowed with soft blue light, and large windows showed people enjoying their meals inside. Dae-ho straightened his dark suit, the biggest size they made, though it was still a bit tight on his massive frame. He had chosen to wear simple clothes instead of his commander's uniform. He wanted to visit as a regular customer, not as the famous Big Shaq. Through the windows, he could see the waiters and waitresses moving gracefully between tables. The restaurant was beautiful, with traditional Korean designs mixed with modern space-age style. Small floating lights that looked like stars moved slowly near the ceiling, and each table had a small garden of real plants growing beside it. Dae-ho took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. He knew some people might not welcome someone who looked like him in such a fancy place, but he also knew that sometimes the best way to change people's minds was to show them kindness, even when they weren't kind to you. As he reached for the door, he saw his reflection in the polished glass. He was nearly twice the size of most other customers, and his muscles made his suit look like it might split at the seams. But his eyes were gentle, and his face showed warmth and intelligence. "Time to see how my restaurant is doing," he thought to himself, pushing the door open carefully so he wouldn't break it. The small bell above the door chimed softly, announcing his arrival. The host at the front desk looked up, and then up some more, as Dae-ho's massive frame filled the doorway. The host's eyes went wide, and Dae-ho could already see the judgment forming in them. But he just smiled politely and said in his gentle voice, "Table for one, please." Little did anyone in the restaurant know that this simple request would start a chain of events that would change how they saw the world and themselves. The giant man they were about to serve was not just any customer. He was their boss, a war hero, and someone who had spent his life proving that you can't judge a book by its cover, even when that cover was 7 feet tall and covered in muscles. Inside the restaurant, a young waitress named Hye-Yun Lee was complaining to her friend about her difficult day. She had no idea that it was about to become even more interesting, and she definitely didn't know that the next customer she would serve would completely change her life. Hye-Yun Lee was not having a good day at Starlight Gardens restaurant. She had already dealt with 3 difficult customers, broken a glass, and her feet hurt from walking in her new shoes. The fancy restaurant's strict dress code meant she had to wear these uncomfortable but elegant black shoes that pinched her toes. She was arranging clean silverware at the service station when her friend Jin-Woo tapped her shoulder. "Hey-Yun, look at the front door," he whispered. "I've never seen anyone that big before." Hey-Yun turned around and nearly dropped the spoon she was holding. Standing in the doorway was the largest man she had ever seen. He was so tall that he had to duck slightly under the decorative lights that floated near the ceiling. His dark suit stretched tight across his massive shoulders, making him look like a mountain dressed up for dinner. "He must be from one of those heavy-gravity planets," she whispered back to Jin-Woo. "But this is Starlight Gardens. We serve diplomats and business leaders here. Not. She waved her hands in the air, trying to find the right words. "Not what?" Jin-Woo asked, frowning slightly. Something about the huge man seemed familiar to him, but he couldn't remember where he might have seen him before. Before Hye-Yun could answer, their host was already leading the giant man toward Section 3. Hye-Yun's section. Her heart sank. Of course he would be seated in her area. That's just how her day was going. "This can't be happening," she muttered, watching as the man carefully lowered himself into one of their expensive chairs. The chair creaked a little but held firm. "Those chairs cost more than I make in a month. If he breaks one." Jin-Woo tried to say something, but Hye-Yun was already walking toward the table, her fake customer service smile firmly in place. As she got closer, she was surprised to see that despite his intimidating size, the man's face was gentle and his eyes were kind. "Welcome to Starlight Gardens," she said, her voice carrying a hint of doubt that she tried to hide. "Can I start you with something to drink?" The huge man smiled at her, and his deep voice was surprisingly soft when he spoke. "Yes, thank you. I'd like to see your wine list, please." Hye-Yun couldn't help herself. She let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Our wine list. Sir, our wines are very—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sophisticated. And expensive. Perhaps I could suggest something more appropriate." The man's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "I would still like to see the wine list, please," he said politely. Hye-Yun brought him the digital wine menu, certain he would be overwhelmed by the prices and complicated names. Instead, he scrolled through it with obvious familiarity. "I'd like the 2185 Mars Colony Cabernet Sauvignon from the Special Reserve Cellar, please." Hye-Yun's eyebrows shot up. That was one of their most expensive wines, and it wasn't even listed on the regular menu. How did he even know about it? "Sir, that wine is quite special. Perhaps something more basic would suit your tastes better." From across the room, Jin-Woo watched the interaction with growing concern. He kept trying to remember why this customer seemed so familiar. Had he seen him on the news? In a history book? The answer was just out of reach. The large man's voice remained calm, but it carried a new weight when he spoke again. "I'm quite familiar with the 2185 vintage. It was an excellent year for the Mars vineyards, particularly after they adjusted the dome's solar filters to match Earth's Mediterranean sunlight patterns." Hye-Yun blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected him to know so much about wine. Still, she couldn't shake her prejudice. "I'll check if we have any available," she said, turning away quickly. At the service station, she leaned close to Jin-Woo. "Can you believe this? He's asking for our best wine. He probably thinks expensive wine means better wine. I bet he can't tell the difference between fine wine and spacecraft fuel. Jin Woo frowned. Hey Yun, maybe you shouldn't. Did you see how the chair creaked when he sat down? She continued, not listening to her friend. I should tell him about that protein shake place down the street. It would suit him better than our restaurant. Hey Yun. Jin Woo's voice was sharp now. Stop it. Something's not right. I know I've seen him somewhere before. But Hey Yun was already walking away, a smirk on her face as she headed to the wine cellar. She had decided to bring him a much cheaper wine, thinking he wouldn't know the difference. After all, how could someone who looked like that possibly be a wine expert? What Hey Yun didn't notice was the restaurant's manager, Yum Mi Park, returning from her meeting. She didn't see how Yum Mi's face turned pale when she spotted their large guest, and she certainly didn't hear Yum Mi's shocked whisper to the host, "Is that Commander Kim?" Oh no, did anyone tell the staff who he is? The evening was about to become much more interesting than Hey Yun could have imagined. Her worst day at work was about to get even more complicated, and her prejudices were about to be challenged in ways she never expected. Hey Yun returned from the wine cellar holding a bottle of cheap wine that looked similar to the expensive one Commander Kim had requested. She had removed the original label and replaced it with one from the special reserve wine. In her mind, she was teaching this large man a lesson about trying to act above his station. "Here's your wine, sir," she said with a fake smile, showing him the bottle with its fancy label. The 2185 Mars Colony Cabernet, as requested. The massive man looked at the bottle carefully. His large fingers, surprisingly gentle, took the bottle and examined it. Hey Yun felt a moment of pride, thinking she had fooled him. But then he spoke, his voice still soft, but now carrying a hint of disappointment. "This isn't the 2185 Mars Colony Cabernet," he said quietly. "The authentic bottles have a small holographic seal in the corner of the label, and the glass has micro-engravings that catch the light in a specific way. This is a much younger wine, probably from Earth's wine regions." Hey Yun's face turned red. She hadn't expected him to know such details. I'll get you the correct bottle," she stammered. "Please do," he replied, still maintaining his politeness. "And perhaps you could bring some water as well. The glasses here seem a bit small for me." Hey Yun looked at the regular-sized water glass on the table and couldn't stop herself from making another rude comment. "Well, most of our customers don't need drinking containers the size of spacecraft fuel tanks," she said under her breath, but loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Several customers looked uncomfortable. Jin Woo, who was serving a nearby table, almost dropped his serving tray. He was still trying to remember why this customer seemed so familiar. There was something about his face that reminded him of an important news story, but he couldn't quite place it. When Hey Yun returned with the correct wine bottle, she found the large man looking at the menu. His massive hands made the digital menu tablet look like a child's toy. "Have you decided what you'd like to eat?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Yes," he said. "I'd like the traditional bulgogi with the space-grown vegetables and a side of kimchi. Also, could you please ask the chef to prepare it the authentic way? I notice you've been adjusting recipes to suit foreign tastes lately." Hey Yun's eyes widened. How did he know about their recipe changes? They had only started modifying dishes 2 weeks ago. Even some regular customers hadn't noticed the difference. "Our chef knows how to prepare Korean food properly," she said sharply. "We don't need advice from someone who probably thinks protein bars are fine dining." The large man's face remained calm, but his eyes showed a flash of sadness. "You know," he said gently, "making assumptions about people based on their appearance often leads to embarrassing mistakes. The only mistake here," Hey Yun said, forgetting all her training, "is you thinking this restaurant is suitable for someone of your size. The chairs are antiques, you know. If you break one, you'll owe more credits than a cargo ship pilot makes in a year." Just then, Yum Mi Park, the restaurant manager, came rushing across the dining room. Her face was pale, and she was walking so fast she nearly tripped over her own feet. Jin-woo watched her approach, and suddenly his memory clicked into place. His face turned white as he finally remembered where he had seen their large guest before. "Hey Yun," Jin-woo called out urgently. "Stop. That's calm." But before he could finish his sentence, Young Mai reached their table. She bowed deeply to the large man, her face showing both respect and fear. "Commander Kim," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I apologize for not greeting you earlier. We are deeply honored to have you dining with us today." Hye-yun felt her stomach drop to her feet. Commander Kim, the famous Commander Dae-ho Kim, the hero who had saved 3 human colonies from space pirates, the legendary Big Shaq himself. But Young Mai wasn't finished. She turned to Hye-yun, her eyes showing a mix of anger and horror. "Hye-yun, do you know who this is?" "This is Commander Dae-ho Kim, one of the most decorated officers in the Galactic Alliance. He's also—" Young Mai paused, her voice getting even shakier. "He's also the owner of Starlight Gardens." Hye-yun felt the room spin around her. The owner? This huge man she had been insulting and trying to trick owned the restaurant. She remembered all her rude comments, her attempt to switch the wine, her suggestions about protein bars and fuel tanks. Each memory felt like a heavy weight dropping onto her shoulders. The other customers were now watching the scene with great interest. Some had recognized the name and were whispering excitedly. A few had taken out their phones to record what was happening. Commander Kim raised his large hand gently, silencing the growing murmurs in the restaurant. "Young me," he said softly, "please sit down. I think it's time we had a conversation about how we treat people in this restaurant. All people, regardless of their appearance." Hye-yun stood frozen, holding her serving tray like a shield. She was sure she was about to be fired. Her job, her career in the restaurant industry, everything was about to end because she had judged someone by their appearance. But Commander Kim's next words surprised everyone in the restaurant. "And Hye-yun," he said, looking at her with those kind eyes that now seemed to hold all the wisdom of the galaxy, "I would very much like you to be part of this conversation. Sometimes the best lessons come from our biggest mistakes." The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Every eye was on their table, watching as history was being made in Starlight Gardens. Nobody knew it yet, but this moment would change not just Hye-yun's life, but the way the entire restaurant industry treated people from high-gravity worlds. Young Mai quickly closed the main dining room of Starlight Gardens to new customers. The other diners had finished their meals and left, many still whispering about what they had seen. Now, Commander Dae-ho Kim sat at a large table with Young Mai, Hye-yun, Jin-woo, and several other staff members. His massive frame made the restaurant's elegant chair look like a child's seat, but he sat there comfortably, his kind eyes moving from person to person. "I grew up on Titan," Commander Kim began, his deep voice gentle. "The gravity there is much stronger than Earth's. That's why I'm so big. My body had to grow strong just to walk and move around normally." Hye-yun sat with her head down, her face still red with shame. She couldn't believe she had been so rude to not just the owner of the restaurant, but to a genuine hero of the Galactic Alliance. "When I was young," Commander Kim continued, "people always judged me by my size. They thought I must be stupid because I was big. They thought I must be violent because I was strong. Teachers wouldn't call on me in class. Restaurants wouldn't serve me because they were afraid I would break their furniture." Jin-woo looked up in surprise. "But you're Commander Kim. You saved the colonies on Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto from the space pirates. You negotiated peace with the Centaurian Republic." Commander Kim smiled. "Yes, but before I was any of those things, I was just a big person who wanted to be treated like everyone else." He turned to Hye-yun. "Tell me, Hye-yun, why did you try to trick me with the wrong wine?" Hye-yun's voice trembled as she answered. I thought someone who looked like you couldn't know about fine wine. I thought you were just trying to show off." Tears began forming in her eyes. "I was so wrong. I'm so sorry." "Do you know why I bought this restaurant?" Commander Kim asked, looking around the table. Nobody answered. 3 months ago, I came here as a customer. The food was excellent, but I noticed how some staff treated people who looked different. They were rude to aliens with unusual features. They gave poor service to people from high-gravity worlds like me. Young Mi's face showed horror as she realized what he was saying. "Commander, I had no idea this was happening in our restaurant. I will fire anyone who..." Commander Kim held up his large hand, stopping her words. "No, young Mi. Firing people doesn't solve the real problem. The problem is much bigger than just this restaurant. It's about how we see people who are different from us." He reached into his suit pocket and took out a small holographic projector. When he turned it on, images appeared in the air above the table. They showed Commander Kim in various situations, leading rescue missions, speaking at peace conferences, teaching at the Galactic Academy. "Look at these images," he said. "In each one, I'm the same person. I'm still 7 feet tall. I'm still strong enough to lift a small vehicle. But in these pictures, people see me as a hero, a leader, a teacher. The only thing that changed was their perspective." Yun looked at the images with wonder. In each one, Commander Kim's huge size seemed to fit perfectly with what he was doing. When he was rescuing people from a crashed spaceship, his strength was a blessing. When he was teaching young officers, his gentle expression and calm manner made his size seem comforting rather than frightening. "I have a different plan for this restaurant," Commander Kim said. "Instead of punishing people for their prejudices, we're going to help them learn. Starting tomorrow, Starlight Gardens will begin a new training program. We'll teach our staff about different cultures, about the various worlds humans now live on, and about treating everyone with respect." Young Mi nodded eagerly. "Yes, Commander. We'll start right away." But she looked uncertain for a moment. What about Yun? Everyone turned to look at Yun, who seemed to shrink in her chair. This was it, she thought. This was when she would lose her job. But Commander Kim surprised them all again. Yun showed us exactly why we need this training. Her actions tonight made the problem clear for everyone to see. That's valuable. Sometimes we need to see our mistakes clearly before we can learn from them. He turned to Yun directly. "So, Yun, I have a special job for you. You will help develop our new training program. You'll share your story, your honest story, about how prejudice affected your judgment. Your experience will help others learn." Yun looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "You're not firing me?" Commander Kim smiled. "No. I believe in second chances. I believe people can learn and grow. Do you want to help make this restaurant a place where everyone feels welcome?" Tears rolled down Yun's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Commander. Thank you. I promise I'll do better." Jinwoo, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. "Commander, is this why you didn't tell anyone you bought the restaurant? You wanted to see how people really behave?" Commander Kim's eyes twinkled. "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to understand it first. Now we understand, and now we can make things better." The meeting continued late into the night. They talked about their experiences, their prejudices, and their hopes for the future. Commander Kim shared stories about his life, about the challenges he had faced, and about the people who had given him chances to prove himself. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. The restaurant was quiet, the floating lights dimmed to a soft glow. But in that quiet dining room, something important had changed. A group of people had learned to see beyond appearances, and a new chapter in Starlight Gardens' history was about to begin. 1 year had passed since that memorable night at Starlight Gardens. The restaurant had changed in many ways, all of them good. On this particular evening, Yun stood in front of a group of new employees, sharing her story just as she had done many times over the past year. "I used to think I knew everything about good service," she told them, her voice clear and confident. "But I was wrong. I learned that good service isn't just about knowing wines or carrying plates correctly. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, for who they are. The training room was full of new staff members. Some were human, some were aliens, and some were from high-gravity worlds like Titan. Hei-yun looked at each of them as she spoke, remembering how she used to judge people based on their appearance. Last year, I made the biggest mistake of my career, she continued. I was rude to a customer because he was very tall and muscular. I thought he didn't belong in our fancy restaurant. That customer turned out to be Commander Dae-ho Kim, our owner and a hero of the Galactic Alliance. The new employees listened carefully. Many had heard this story before. It had become famous in the restaurant industry, but hearing it from Hei-yun herself was different. They could see the genuine change in her eyes. But Commander Kim didn't fire me, Hei-yun said, smiling at the memory. Instead, he taught me the most important lesson of my life. He showed me that true strength isn't in your muscles. It's in how you treat others. Just then, the door opened quietly. Commander Kim himself had to duck to enter the room, but now everyone stood up straighter with respect, rather than backing away in fear. He smiled at Hei-yun and gestured for her to continue. Starlight Gardens is different now, Hei-yun explained. We've changed our furniture to be comfortable for people of all sizes. We've added menu items from 20 different worlds. Our wine cellar has selections from every human colony that makes wine. But the biggest change is in how we think and treat people. Young-mei, who was standing at the back of the room, nodded in agreement. Under the new training program, customer satisfaction had increased by 200%. The restaurant had become famous not just for its food, but for its welcoming atmosphere. Every week, Hei-yun continued, we have customers from different planets, with different bodies and different customs. And do you know what I learned? Every single one of them has an interesting story. Every single one of them deserves our respect. Commander Kim walked to the front of the room to stand beside Hei-yun. Even after a year, the sight of his massive frame still impressed people. But now, the staff saw his size as just another part of who he was, like his kind smile or his gentle voice. Hei-yun is our best trainer now, Commander Kim told the new employees. She turned her mistake into a mission to help others learn. That's the kind of courage we value here at Starlight Gardens. Hei-yun blushed at his praise. Commander Kim visits the restaurant every month now, she told the group. And he always sits in my section. This made everyone laugh, including the commander. After the training session, Hei-yun was serving dinner to a group of guests when she noticed a new customer walking in. He was an alien with bright blue skin and 4 arms. A year ago, she might have stared or whispered to Jinwoo about his strange appearance. But now, she simply smiled warmly and walked over to greet him. "Welcome to Starlight Gardens," she said, meaning every word. "May I help you find a comfortable seat?" The alien looked surprised at her friendly welcome. "I heard this place was different," he said. "That it's a place where everyone is welcome." "That's right," Hei-yun replied proudly. "Would you like to hear the story of how we became that way? It all started one night when I made a very big mistake." From his regular table, Commander Kim watched Hei-yun talking with the alien customer. Her body language was open and friendly, her smile genuine. She was taking extra time to explain the menu items, making sure the alien felt comfortable and valued. Jinwoo, now the head waiter, stopped by Commander Kim's table. "It's amazing how much has changed," he said. "Hei-yun has become our best ambassador for the new Starlight Gardens." Commander Kim nodded. Sometimes people just need a chance to learn and grow. Hei-yun didn't just learn. She helped create something new. Now Starlight Gardens isn't just a restaurant. It's a place where prejudices are left at the door and everyone is treated with dignity. That evening, as the floating lights created their star-like patterns on the ceiling, the restaurant was full of happy customers. There were humans of all sizes, aliens of all types, and even a group of young officers from the Galactic Alliance. The sound of different languages and laughter filled the air. Hei-yun looked around the dining room with pride. She saw Commander Kim finishing his meal. The same bulgogi he had ordered that first night, still prepared the authentic way. She saw new staff members confidently serving customers they might once have feared or judged. She saw what Starlight Gardens had become, a shining example of how people could change for the better. As she passed Commander Kim's table, he smiled at her. "Good evening, Hae-yun," he said in his gentle voice. "How are you doing today?" "Wonderful, Commander," she replied honestly. "Every day here teaches me something new." "That's good," he said, "because that's what Starlight Gardens is really about. It's not just about serving food. It's about serving hope, hope that people can learn to see past appearances and find the truth in each other's hearts." Hae-yun nodded, understanding completely. She had learned that lesson the hard way, but it had changed her life for the better. Now, every time she looked at Commander Kim's massive frame, she didn't see someone who didn't belong. She saw a teacher, a leader, and most importantly, a friend who had given her the chance to become a better person. The story of Starlight Gardens and Hae-yun's transformation became well known throughout the galaxy. Other restaurants began copying their training program. Slowly but surely, the restaurant industry was changing, becoming more welcoming to all kinds of people. And it all started because a gentle giant had decided to teach instead of punish, to help instead of hurt, and to believe in the power of second chances.